everyone, so I'm Anusha. Mr. Delmonico just gave a great introduction. So I am Alicia's sister, I'm in high school, I'm 15, and I founded this nonprofit organization called the Climate Catalyst Foundation. And our mission is basically to educate and teach students just like you about climate change, because you guys are ultimately the ones that are gonna have to deal with this problem. So today I'm gonna teach you guys about the basics of climate change, causes, effects, and solutions. So before we get started with that, let's talk about weather versus climate. Who knows what the difference is? Yes.
Weather is it can change. It can change. Climate is it usually stays the same.
Exactly, yeah. So that's a really, really good definition. Does anyone have anything they want to add?
Weather is basically like snow, sunny, rainy. Climate is the temperature of what is like the heat and coldness.
Exactly, that's a really good one as well. Anyone else? Okay, so yes.
Does climate change have anything to do with this?
Well, yeah, so climate is part of climate change, and first we want to know the difference between weather and climate in order to understand climate change. So your ideas were really good. So weather is short-term and it's specific. So an example would be like, oh, it's raining today. If you can say today in front of weather, then that means that it is an example of weather, because weather is a short-term specific event. It can change over time. You can say like, oh, it's raining today, but it's sunny tomorrow. So it's a specific thing that happens over a short-term period of time. Climate, on the other hand, is long-term and it's an average. So you can say the climate of the Sahara Desert is very dry. It's not dry today and it'll be like wet tomorrow. It's just dry over a long period of time. So an example of climate is wet. Like it could be wet in the rainforest, it could be wet in like wetlands, and that's an average. And that's in contrast to weather, which is cloudy. You can say it's cloudy today, but it's sunny tomorrow. Does anyone have questions? Okay, so just to see if you guys understand, if I say it's snowing, is it weather or climate? You guys can shout it out.
Weather.
Exactly, it's weather, because it's snowing today, but it might not be snowing tomorrow. So what about dry?
Climate.
Exactly, because it doesn't have to be, it's not like dry in one specific period of time, it's dry over a long period of time. So you guys obviously know what the difference is between weather and climate. So let's move on to climate change. What is climate change? Who knows? Yes.
Climate change is caused by greenhouse gases, which are like contain CO2 and methane, and then it goes in the atmosphere, and then it contains the sun and gets hotter and hotter.
Exactly. So what you said about getting hotter and hotter, that's exactly what we want to focus on. But who knows what climate change, like by definition, is? Not climate change that's occurring in our world, just like climate change.
It's basically when the climate of some place changes.
Exactly,
like
yeah.
When it goes like higher or lower.
Exactly. Anyone else?
Oh wait. I mean, that's basically what you said.
Okay, yeah. So climate change by definition is essentially the long-term change in a climate of a region over a certain period of time. So an example of this is, let's take 10 years ago, right? How much did it rain like during the summer 10 years ago? I know you guys were really little then, so you probably don't remember. Yes?
I was 0 years old, so I would not know.
That's true. So 10 years ago, it didn't really rain that much, but how much has it rained this summer?
A lot.
Exactly. So that's an example of climate change. It wasn't raining at all before, but now it's raining like excessively. Like every single weekend, all we see is rain. So that's an example of climate change. So this is a graph of the global average temperature. Who knows what the global average temperature means? Yes?
Like the average temperature of the world.
Exactly. So the average temperature of the world, and it's starting at 1860. Oops. It's starting at 1860, and it goes all the way to the 2000s. So what do you guys notice about this graph? Yes?
It goes up.
Exactly. The red line is going up, right? So what does that mean?
It's getting hotter.
Exactly. So the average temperature, it used to be around here, but as we've progressed over time, it's ended up over here. So that means that the atmosphere of the Earth is getting warmer. And that's exactly what climate change is, and that's what we're experiencing today in terms of climate change. So do you guys have any questions? Yes.
What exactly does, how can climate change affect the world? Like,
Exactly, that's the exact next slide. So there are a bunch of different effects of hotter temperatures and climate change. So who can think of a few?
Antarctica is melting because of climate change.
Yeah, exactly. Glaciers are melting. Who else?
Polar bears are like now moving down.
Yeah, exactly. So the biodiversity is being affected
Is it just like in Scarsdale or around the world?
around the world.
So it's not really like snowing that much?
Yeah, exactly.
Droughts.
Droughts, yeah,
Extreme weather, more extreme weather.
exactly.
Fire.
Fire, yeah, that's a good one.
A bit more rainy in some places.
Exactly. So there are a bunch of different effects of hotter temperatures, and a lot of them were the ones that you guys mentioned. So we have melting glaciers, heat waves, droughts, extreme weather, biodiversity loss, floods, wildfires, and these are just a few. There are way, way more. But who knows what all of these impacts have in common? Yes.
They are like not good for our planet.
Exactly. What else?
They're all caused by climate change.
They're all caused by climate change, yeah.
They're all caused by hotter temperatures.
Yes.
Environment.
Okay. Yes.
They're all caused by greenhouse gas, and what like Braden said, it causes all that.
Yeah, exactly. So these are all really, really good ideas, and they're all right. But what they all have in common is they all threaten cities and people, and that's exactly why climate change is really, really bad, because it causes all these different things that are really bad for our planet. Questions? Okay. So, how will climate change affect Scarsdale specifically? This is a map of New York, and Scarsdale is right here, where the red star is. This is touchscreen. Scarsdale's right here where the red star is. So, what do you notice about it? What's it close to? Is it like close to water? Is it in the middle of nowhere? Yes.
It's close to water, and climate change raises ocean levels.
Exactly. So what does that mean for Scarsdale?
It might like flood.
Exactly. So climate change can affect Scarsdale through floods, and I'm sure a lot of you have already experienced flooding in your basement during like rainstorms and things like that. So all that is just going to get exacerbated with climate change. So that's one way that climate change can affect Scarsdale. So now we know what climate change is, we know what the effects are, we know how it's going to affect Scarsdale, but what is actually causing climate change? Who has some ideas? Yes.
Greenhouse gases.
Greenhouse gases, yeah, but where are those emissions coming from?
Like when people don't recycle and then just like.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
Factories.
Factories.
To add on to what Ava said, landfills, because when they get mixed with compost, it creates the chemical that Braden said. I don't remember how it's called, but it's methane. Yeah, methane, and then that creates greenhouse gas, which creates natural disasters.
Yeah, exactly.
Cars.
Yeah, cars.
Cows.
Cows, definitely.
People.
People, yeah, definitely.
Anything with like exhaust coming out of it.
Exhaust, yeah, definitely. So all of these are really, really good. There are a bunch of different causes. These are just some of them. We have cars, which was mentioned, factories, airplanes, electricity, deforestation, and animal farming. So these are some of the most major ones, major causes of emissions, which is leading to climate change. Does anyone have questions? Yes.
What's animal farming?
Animal farming is basically like agriculture. So it's when you raise cattle or you raise cows or you like make crops in order to eat. Does that clarify?
But how is that hurting the planet?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, when we feed cows, we feed them like cornmeal, right? And that's really bad because cows have this natural process. So when they like burp and fart, they're releasing emissions, they're releasing methane, and that's really bad for the planet. Any other questions? Okay. So the main cause of climate change. Greenhouse gases are emitted. So a few of you already mentioned this, but greenhouse gases are essentially things like carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, nitrous oxides. There are a bunch of different chemicals that are classified into greenhouse gases. So these are emitted from all the different sources that you guys mentioned, and that was on the last slide. So what exactly does that mean? They're emitted and they go into the atmosphere. So Earth's atmosphere is like a greenhouse. Essentially how it works is, let's say this is Earth, right? The atmosphere is like around it like a greenhouse, and what that means is we're releasing all these gases into the atmosphere. So then they can't escape, like they can't leave the atmosphere, so they get trapped in the atmosphere. Just like heat gets trapped in a greenhouse. So all these gases are getting trapped in the atmosphere, and then they get heated from the sun because of what I just explained. They're all like trapped in the atmosphere, the sun is coming, like when you go outside you get hot, right? Well, these gases are getting hot as well. So we have all these gases which are getting heated, and the Earth gets warmer because we have all these warm gases trapped in the atmosphere, and that leads to hotter temperatures. So that's exactly like the kind of chain of how climate change happens, from the source all the way to the impact. Does anyone have questions? Yes.
In about how many years will we have to go to stage 4? Like when it's just like Earth is very cold.
Yeah, well, actually, Earth is getting warmer in the status quo. So the graph that we saw at the very beginning about global average temperatures, that's happening right now, and Earth is getting warmer right now. So the UN and a bunch of these different countries have pledged to not emit more so that we don't reach the 2 degrees Celsius mark, which is exactly how much would need to be emitted for Earth to essentially be uninhabitable and have really bad conditions. So to answer your question, the Earth is getting warmer in the status quo, and approximately by like 2050, 2060 is when we're going to see Earth experiencing a lot of the really, really bad impacts of climate change.
So, do you think when do you think if we all like didn't make greenhouse gases and we just stopped at all, how long would the recovery be?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So let's say we all stopped like emitting right now, right? Like we switched to renewable energy and we're just like creating zero emissions. The problem with that is that there's already a lot of greenhouse gases already in the atmosphere, and we need to take those out. So essentially you can think of Earth's atmosphere like a bathtub, and the water is essentially the greenhouse gases, and the faucets are the different sources. So you can think of it like a bunch of different faucets from all the different countries, all the different companies, and all the sources of emissions. The drain is like the trees, the oceans, all the things that are that are taking emissions out. The thing is, right now, we're deleting drains, like we're getting rid of them. We're cutting down trees, we're polluting the oceans, so our drains are getting smaller and our taps are getting bigger. So what does that mean for the water? Is it gonna go down or go up? Call it out. Exactly. So what we need to do is people are thinking of creating new drains. So these drains would be man-made, and they would essentially be like machines that take carbon dioxide out of the environment. So to answer your question, if we actually transition to all renewable energy right now, there's already so much water in the bathtub that we need to make a lot more drains in order to make Earth healthy again. Any other questions?
I have a question. How is it possible that like in 1830s, 1840s, it's like coldish weather in summer or spring, and for example now in 2020s the weather is hot. How is it
Yeah, so that's a
possible?
really good question.
It's the same summer, but in 1830s it's coldish, but now it's warm. How is it possible?
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what climate change is. So the reason that like the temperature is going up so much is because of greenhouse gases and emissions. So the reason that temperatures have increased so drastically in this short period of time is because of something called like the Industrial Revolution that happened in the 1800s, which you guys will learn about later. But essentially what happened in the 1800s is people discovered like coal essentially. And what they did is they started burning coal on like a really, really big scale, and that resulted in a lot of emissions. So then people started burning more and more coal because they were like, oh wow, with coal like we can have warm houses, we can produce things on a mass scale, and our economies are doing really well. So people were doing all these things in the 1800s, and they were creating all of these greenhouse gas emissions. So based on this chain, these greenhouse gases were emitted, they were trapped, they were warmed up, and then now Earth is getting warmer. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
So like I'm saying like if this continues, will us and like you will probably be experiencing like
Yeah.
uninhabitable places
Exactly.
like
So
in the future.
yeah, so the idea is that if we don't change the path that we're going on, if we don't stop emitting, and if we don't switch to renewable technology, green energy, and all these things, then by 2050, Earth's gonna be a pretty bad place to live.
So like that just means that humans will become extinct then? Like
Well,
over time?
Over time, yes, but that's a really, really long time away. But the idea is that around 2050, like, so some scientists say that by 2050, the oceans aren't going to have a lot of fish or coral reefs left. Like, by 2050, there are going to be a lot of emissions, and Earth is just going to have, like, a lot of really bad extreme weather, droughts, floods. There's going to be a lot of, like, the impacts that we talked about going on.
Around what time did climate change happen? Like start?
Yeah, so climate, like essentially this rapid global warming started around the 1800s, around the time of the Industrial Revolution. Any other questions?
How long has climate change been going on? Well, actually, wait. I think you just answered that.
Yeah, so it's basically climate change doesn't necessarily mean warming, but climate change, the way we think about it, means warming, and the warming started in the 1800s.
So, you know, like, is it possible for us to inhabit on a different planet?
Well, space travel is something that a lot of companies are working on right now, such as like SpaceX or like Blue Origin. So a lot of companies and NASA, the government like program, they're working on it, but we haven't found a way to get to other planets and actually live there yet. But it's definitely an option. Any other questions? Yes.
Is there life on Mars?
No.
Not that we found. Okay, so let's talk about solutions. Yes, climate change is bad. Climate change is going to cause Earth to have a lot of bad conditions, and climate change has a lot of sources. But let's try to focus on solutions now. So 3 major solutions that we've invented and that we've started implementing is electric cars, solar panels, and wind turbines. So who knows what an electric car is? Pretty much everyone? Okay, yes? Yeah, you.
It's like a car. Well, actually, never mind.
Okay.
It's a car that's charged by electricity.
Yeah, exactly. Yes?
So like regular cars, they have like motors that where you put oil in there, but an electric car has a charger where you just plug the charger and you don't need any of those guns with oil.
Exactly.
Like it won't be fully like 100% it's not going because like most electricity still come from like fossil fuels, so it won't fully become like
Exactly.
until we stop using electricity that come from fossil fuels.
Exactly. So you guys really understand the idea of electric cars. So like a lot of you said, electric cars are cars that run on electricity instead of gas. So like was mentioned, one problem with electric cars is that electricity, at least the way it's produced right now by a lot of places, it emits fossil fuels. So electric cars are better than gas cars, but they still emit. So don't think that they're like entirely green. So that's what electric cars are. What about solar panels?
They kind of like gather the sun's energy and like kind of yeah.
Exactly. So they create electricity from the sun. So these are really good because it's a renewable source, which means that it won't run out. You're not going to run out of sunlight. Sunlight is always going to be there. So it creates electricity from sunlight, and that's good. It doesn't have emissions, and it's renewable.
What about during the nighttime?
Yeah, so that's one problem with solar power. It's that the sun doesn't shine at night. But a solution to this is batteries. You can take in the energy in the during the daytime and then store it so that you can still power whatever you want to during the night. So who knows what a wind turbine is?
Basically, a wind turbine is this big pole with it's basically this big fan. The wind, based on the wind, it spins the turbine and it gets it to spin, when it spins, it generates electricity. So it's naturally spinning by the wind, and it's not.
Exactly. So that really encapsulated what exactly a wind turbine does and what it is. Yes. Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. Yes.
It's kind of like how the solar panels are gathering the sun's energy. It's gathering the wind's energy.
Exactly, yeah. So solar panels and wind turbines both are a really great source of electricity. They're renewable, sunlight and wind don't run out. They don't create any carbon emissions, and they produce electricity. So these are three really big solutions that are being utilized and implemented right now, and these are really good ways that we can combat some of the emissions. Any questions? Yes.
I'm pretty sure there is other technology.
Yeah, there definitely is. I just wanted to cover the big ones, but there definitely is a lot more technology. Yes.
What do you mean run out of materials?
What do you mean materials? Like coal?
No, for this.
Oh, for these?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yes, the materials are exhaustible, but they're really abundant in Earth's nature, so they won't, they won't really run out. That's not really an issue.
When coal runs out, what will happen? Essentially.
Yeah, so that's a really big issue with coal. It's that it's exhaustible. So let's say that none of this existed, right? The only method for producing energy was coal. Then when it ran out, we'd be in a lot of trouble. We wouldn't have any way to really create electricity. So that's the problem with fossil fuels, because they're exhaustible. That's exactly why transitioning to renewable energy is a really big thing that people are trying to do. Any other questions?
So if coal is extremely exhaustible, and because I know that some people won't use these methods because, well, solar panels can be expensive and so can electric cars. This means that if someone that uses only coal and they run out of coal, what would happen for most of the people who rely on coal?
Yeah, exactly. So the point you brought up about it being expensive is a really big one. So solar panels, electric cars, all these things are really expensive. But right now, governments are trying to get people to start using these. So they've granted a lot of grants, a lot of subsidies, a lot of financial incentives. So what that basically means is that governments are making the prices for these things less, and they're kind of paying people to use these things because they want to reach their net zero emission targets. Any other questions?
This is actually wait.
Okay.
But how can the government pay for all of this if there are already billions of dollars in debt?
Yeah, so debt is a really good point, but the thing is, we've been in debt for so long, and because of things like deficit spending and economic hegemony and things like that, debt isn't really a problem, and investments and things like that. So the government still has budgets for a bunch of different things, like social spending, healthcare still exists. They grant subsidies on not only these things, but a bunch of different kinds of technology. So yes, debt exists, but debt isn't really a problem for countries like the US, even though we're in a lot of debt. Does anyone else have questions?
I think so.
Okay. So now we know about all this technology, we know about the causes of climate change, the impacts, we know about all these really important things. So let's focus on what you guys, as 5th graders who go to Edgewood Elementary School, can do. So one thing that you can do is buy food from farmers markets. it's a lot better to buy food from local markets than to buy food from things like really big chains like Whole Foods because of transportation emissions. What this means is that let's say you're buying bananas, right, from Whole Foods. These bananas are probably grown somewhere really far away. They're probably grown in a place like Brazil, and that's really far. It obviously costs money and creates a lot of emissions to bring it from Brazil to your plate. So transportation emissions is a really big one to think about when it comes to food. So buy food from local farmers markets. Another one is walk and bike. If you can walk and bike to short distances, like across short distances, it's better to do that than take a car because A, you're getting exercise, which you all need, and B, you're preventing the emissions from the car. Another one, take shorter showers. Short does not mean non-existent. Please still shower, just take shorter showers. Don't waste water. Just still stay sanitized, be clean. Just don't waste water. Don't take those 2-hour-long baths. Waste less. So this one basically means don't waste your resources. Don't waste paper. Don't waste food. Just don't waste. Use what you need to, and don't throw away things that don't need to be thrown away. Recycle and compost. Recycle goes hand in hand with wasting less. If you're throwing away a piece of paper, before throwing it away, think about it. Can I use this for something else? Can I use this for an art project? Can I repurpose this? So recycling is a really big one, and composting is also a big one. When you're throwing away food, before throwing it away, most food can be composted, and then you can use it in things like your garden. I know Edgewood has a garden. So recycling and composting is a really big one. Plant trees. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Trees are really good for the environment. Planting them is going to help the environment. Turn off lights when you leave a room. This one's also pretty self-explanatory. Lights require electricity and energy. Don't waste electricity and energy. If you're leaving a room, turn off the lights. Useless plastic. Just don't use plastic bags. Don't use plastic bottles. Use reusable bottles. Yeah. And the most important thing that you guys need to do is keep learning about climate change because you guys are the new generation. My grade, all the grades below me, we all are gonna have to deal with climate change, and it's really important that you guys know what's going on, you know how to fix it, and you know what you can do to help. So keep learning. When you go home, maybe research a little bit about this. What's going on in Scarsdale? What's going on in New York? How can I help climate change? So ultimately, what I want you guys to take away from this presentation is that climate change is bad. We know that. Climate change has these really big, kind of tedious solutions. We need to reduce all these emissions. We have green technology, we have renewable sources of energy, but there's a lot of things that you guys as 5th grade students can do. So as Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Ultimately, you guys are the ones that are gonna have to help the climate crisis. You're the ones who are gonna have to make change. So it starts with you guys, and that's what I want you guys to take away. Thank you.